being able to connect to your body and practicing connecting to your body is an important part of this healing process. It's something that I talk about in kind of a variety of ways or circumstances. But what does it really mean to connect to your body? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you for joining me. If you've followed me for very long at all, you have likely heard me say many times, connect to your body, connect within, connect to your breath. And I know that it can be really difficult for a lot of people for, again, a number of reasons. But I think part of the challenge can be, what does that really mean? Like, what is supposed to happen when I connect to my body? So I wanted to share a little bit more about what that means, but also kind of go through a little bit of a practice to help you understand it, maybe to experience it a little bit. So I do want you to be mindful of following along today, because if you have difficulty connecting to your body, to your breath, whatever, then this may feel like it might be a little bit too much. And even if that isn't a struggle for you generally, if you're having a particularly difficult day, if you're feeling like really stressed or wired, this could potentially be helpful for you. But it also, because that might be creating some vulnerability for you, it's possible that this could create a little bit more vulnerability. So just be mindful of how you're feeling. And if you notice having some emotional difficulty or some sort of physiological reaction that feels like it might be too much, then just move away from it. You can save it and come back later. There's nothing wrong with that. Just honor what is present for you, okay? So even like thinking about honoring what is present for you, it can be hard to really know what that means. And when it comes to being able to honor what is present for you, that includes certainly what we're feeling, what emotions are there, what thoughts are there. But a lot of how we know the impact or how much is by what's happening in our body. And so for all of us at any given time, there is a sensation that is existing, that we are experiencing in our body, whether we're able to connect to what that is or not. So even if you just think about temperature, right? So you may be in a like a room temperature room that is just kind of good temperature for your body. So you may not really notice the temperature, but if it's a little cold, a little warm, if you pay attention, you can actually notice, like if you feel your hand, what does the temperature feel like? If you feel your arm, what does that feel like? The temperature of it. Or like a lot of people have cold hands or feet, right? So you can kind of notice like, oh yeah, my feet are feeling a little cold. So even something as simple and constant as the room temperature or the outdoor temperature if you're outside, it's something that our body is experiencing. But most of us are not really paying attention to that. Like we might know that we're cold, but it's because we're in a circumstance that we know it's cold. We're not necessarily in a space that is somewhat neutral maybe, and really paying attention and noticing that our feet or our hands or our shoulders or whatever are feeling cold. So certainly something as simple as that, and certainly things that are much more significant like pain, but not really paying attention to it, maybe not even really noticing it. And this can come up a lot for people that like have like some discomfort, maybe like in their muscles, or maybe even have like a mild headache, and they don't necessarily notice it until they go to do something or somebody asks them or it's pointed out in some way. I think most of us probably can relate to that to some degree. So there are a lot of things that are happening within our bodies at any given time. And I want to be clear, I'm not ever suggesting that we should try to get to a where we become aware of everything that's happening in our body. That is definitely not at all what I'm suggesting. But being able to recognize that reality can be a bit of like an entry point into recognizing that the practice of connecting to our body doesn't have to be like this kind of dramatic sort of thing. Like we don't have to practice it when there's a lot happening and we need to be able to connect to it and understand what it is. Because I think that's a fear that a lot of people have. So if we can just kind of take a step back and recognize that just the simple things that are going to be present at any particular time in the day, that's a way to start practicing connecting to our body. Now, in a lot of the things that I talk about, like when I'm going through a breathing exercise or something like that, I may be really specific about like noticing what it feels like to inhale, right? Like feeling the expansion of your lungs or your belly, or feeling the contraction when you exhale. So those are very specific types of things, and there can be a lot of benefit in doing that. And it can be a good practice to help you connect more to your body. There can be like progressive relaxation. That can be a practice of kind of scanning your body and going through and noticing different things where there's tension, or even intentionally tensing up parts of your body and then releasing. Those are all certainly helpful ways of connecting to your body, and they can be really good for you as well. But part of the reason that connecting to your body is important for this healing process, the first part of that is because we do tend to be very disconnected from our bodies. So just learning to be in our bodies, learning to recognize that we are part of our bodies, that our bodies are part of us, being able to be in our body without feeling afraid or ashamed, like those are important things. And there's a lot of different practices that help with that. But the other part of it is that when we are able to connect to our bodies and be aware of and connected to what's happening within them, we are better able to honor what is present for us. And if there is something going on, like if there is something that isn't feeling well, if there is pain, that's obviously important so that we can address it. And when I talk about self-care, part of the thing about self-care is being able to connect to the things that we need, right? So, and honoring ourselves in a variety of ways, that is an important part of the practicing that we do along this healing journey as well. So being able to connect to our physical bodies, being able to connect to what is happening inside of our bodies, sensations and emotions, they are an important part of both the healing process and our overall wellness. So if we think about just kind of that first level that I was talking about, let's take a moment and just kind of practice doing that first level, okay? So again, if you don't feel like you're in a place to do this right now, just save this and come back to it later. But if you feel like this is something that might be helpful for you, then let's go ahead and do it. So it doesn't necessarily matter to me like how you're sitting or whatever you're doing, though I would encourage you to try to be present. So I would encourage you to try to do this when you're not doing other things. So let's start first with just noticing the temperature. So, well, actually, even before we get to that, just let's take a couple of breaths. It doesn't have to be a deep breath. Just make sure that you're present and you're breathing. So just becoming present in this moment, and then noticing where your body is in the space that it's in. So you might be standing, you might be sitting, you might be lying down. Just noticing the position of your body. So for example, I'm sitting right now. I'm sitting on a chair and my feet are up on a little footstool below me. So for me, what I'm noticing is that because I'm kind of feeling it a little bit. So I can feel the weight in the chair, right? I can feel supported in that. I feel pretty relaxed in this position. I can notice a little bit of tightness in my back. I'm actually having a little bit of hip pain today, so I'm noticing that. But what I want you to start with, if you're not able to notice any particular sensations, what I want you to be able to notice is temperature, right? So first you're noticing where your body is in space. And then notice temperature. So like I have long sleeves on right now, so I can't actually notice any sort of temperature like on my arms or my torso. While my shirt is a V-neck, I actually don't notice any temperature on my chest either. And I'm wearing pants. So I'm not really noticing any temperature there. If I feel my hands feel a little cool to the touch. So even just noticing that, and maybe they don't really feel like much of anything. Maybe the palm of your hand feels like the same temperature as the top of your hand. So for me, I'm actually not wearing socks right now. And so I can feel that my feet feel a little cool. Like I can actually feel the temperature of my feet. Like obviously I don't know what the temperature is, but I can feel that they feel a little bit cool. And if you don't necessarily notice any particular temperature on your skin, then you can feel and see if you notice any difference. And if you don't notice any difference there, or even if you do, a way that you can also do this is, what does it feel like? So like if you feel your hand or maybe a finger, what do you notice? And there isn't going to be anything specific that you need to notice. It's just noticing it and maybe holding each finger and just noticing what it feels like for the finger you're holding, and notice what it feels like in the hand that you're holding it in, like noticing the pressure maybe. So this can be a really simple way to start connecting to your body. You could also like put your hands on your arms and just notice it, maybe even pushing a little bit to just notice the sensation and any sort of change that you recognize in putting that pressure on there. Maybe even like feeling down your arm and noticing different sensations, noticing what it feels like in the hand that you're using to do that. You might even notice as you're doing that places where you might feel a little bit more tension, or you might notice a bruise that you have that you didn't even recognize before. These are all aspects of connecting to your body. So it really can start in a pretty simple way. And while it may seem like there's no real point in it, it actually is beneficial in a couple of different ways. One, it can ease you into getting more connected to your body. But if you think about it, we don't tend to engage with our bodies a whole lot, right? So even like the act of doing this, like I don't touch my arm like this, unless I'm cold and I'm rubbing it, but I don't like do this. But the act of touching ourselves in kind of like a gentle way, a way that we are very present and noticing what's happening, it can actually bring up emotion for people, because when we are disconnected from our body, whether we're touching ourselves or somebody else is touching us, we can be disconnected from the experience of being touched. And touching our own bodies in just regular sorts of ways like I was just now, but if we're talking about intimacy and sexuality and stuff like that, actually doing it that way is a whole other sort of video, but there's benefit in that as well. So while it may seem silly, it may seem really insignificant and not helpful, if you are somebody that struggles to be connected to your body, or even if you're just feeling disconnected from your life in general, doing something like that actually can be helpful. So if anything that I just talked you through feels uncomfortable to you, or you're having difficulty feeling anything, noticing anything, just continue to practice that. Just continue to practice that on a regular basis, and over time, you will feel more. If you are somebody that you are aware of what's happening, you're able to feel those things, you can take it a little bit deeper. So again, I mentioned before about the breath, right? Like being able to recognize the expansion of your lungs and your belly when you take a nice full deep inhale, and feeling the contraction when you exhale. If you enjoy breathing exercises, that can be a really, really good way of doing that. But even if you think about, like for example, if you do like a twist in yoga, and I'm using that because that engages a lot more in most people are going to feel something there. But if you think about like a twist in yoga where you're twisting your body, like your bottom half is stationary and you're twisting, doing like a spinal stretch. In this position, even just like right here, I can feel a lot of sensation in my spine. I can actually feel a little bit in my low back. Depending on how much you twist, you might feel a little something in your shoulder. So moving your body in ways that you create sensation, obviously not to a point that it's going to cause you pain, but where it creates some sort of sensation. So it could be, I'm trying to think of another example. Like if you stand, particularly like on one foot, because that takes a little bit more balance and you're going to have to be a little bit more present. Standing on 2 feet is something you do without even having to think about it. But if you can stand like on one foot, you're likely going to notice the sensations, right? Because your foot is feeling, your leg is bearing the weight, your ankle is having to balance you, your foot is balancing you. You may feel kind of unstable. You may feel some burning in your leg the longer you stand there. But those are sensations that are happening in your body. And if you can create circumstances that allow you to create a sensation that you can recognize, that can be part of the practice as well. So like even something as simple as like holding your hands above your head, unless you're very, very like fit and active, most of us don't have to hold our arms above our head for too awfully long before we start feeling it. And hopefully it doesn't hurt, but even just like if you notice that, you will start to feel some sensation. You might feel tired. Where are you feeling it? Are you feeling it in your shoulder? Are you feeling it in your tricep? Are you feeling it in your fingers? Are your fingers maybe starting to tingle? I know if I have my arms up above my head for too long, my hands will actually start to tingle. So there are a lot of different ways that we can engage our body in a way to create sensation that we can start to pay attention to. And when we can recognize the sensation that it's creating and just notice it, we don't have to do anything about it. Like everything that I've just talked about, we don't have to do anything with it or about it. We just notice it. When we make that connection, that we notice what is happening, that our mind is connecting to what is happening in our body, that is connecting to our body. That is the practice of being able to honor what is present for us. Another example would be for a lot of people when they feel anxiety in whatever way that might look, or for whatever reason it might be there. When we feel anxiety, a lot of people tend to feel maybe a little bit, their heart rate might increase, or they might notice feeling a little nauseous. Maybe feeling some tension somewhere, maybe noticing some tension in your jaw. When we can be present with that, like for a lot of people, You don't notice it when it's happening, but afterward you might notice feeling like, wow, my jaw is hurting, or wow, I'm feeling a little nauseous, or something like that. Even if it's afterward, being able to recognize what happened, what happened in your body, that can be really helpful. But like when we feel anxiety and we have one of those reactions, if we're able to connect to our body in an easier way, a more natural, organic way, then if we're feeling the symptoms that we tend to have associated with anxiety or fear, then if we can notice it, then we can begin to do something to affect it. So an example might be that you might be in a situation around people, and maybe you start to notice feeling something, and you can recognize what's happening and think, okay, I'm feeling anxious. And it's important that you not berate yourself for feeling anxious, but okay, I'm feeling anxious. And then you can do something to help alleviate some of that anxiety. And there are a number of things that you can practice doing that can help alleviate the anxiety. But one thing that I will say about this, and this is true for a lot of practices along this healing process, that there are times that just becoming aware and kind of connecting the dots, so to speak, that by itself can help alleviate some of what is happening. So even just kind of noticing that and making that connection can actually be an important part of various aspects of this process. So if you recognize that you're feeling anxious, you can practice some self-compassion. Maybe there's something that you can actually do to help reduce some of that anxiety. Might be self-talk. In addition to self-compassion, maybe you're reminding yourself that you're safe, reminding yourself that this is just kind of a learned response in your body, that there really isn't anything for you to be afraid of. So self-talk, self-compassion can be a really important part of that. Depending on the circumstance, it might also be something that you think, okay, this isn't feeling good to me and I really don't want to be doing this. So maybe you remove yourself from it. But if you're not aware of that, if you're not connected to your body, then you're going to continue to be in a situation where you're maybe berating yourself and in a place where you really don't want to be and maybe isn't good for you. If you're not connected to that, then you're going to be in that situation longer, which can create more damage in a sense by either reinforcing various beliefs or creating even more difficulty within your body. So, the connecting with the body is an important practice, but the primary reason that it's so important is so that you can take that information, that recognition, that awareness, and then do something with it. And again, just the acknowledgement of it, right? Like if you think about a child who is maybe feeling anxious about something, if you think about somebody who's like maybe around like 6 years old and they're really anxious about something, as somebody who cares about that child, you don't have to do something to specifically alleviate what they're anxious about. Like they're anxious for their first day of school. Well, you're not going to keep them home and never send them to school, right? But as somebody who can acknowledge their anxiety, who can be gentle and kind and understanding and compassionate with their anxiety, with just that, not having to actually do anything to change the circumstance, but just by doing that, you can really help that child and their level of anxiety, right? Well, the same thing is true for us no matter how old we are. Particularly for people that have experienced childhood trauma, when we didn't get that experience as a child, even from ourselves, learning to do that for ourselves is a really important part of this healing process as well. So, and the further, or I guess the more experienced you become in being able to connect to your body, you can actually get to a place where when you start to feel anxious about something, or you start to feel worried about something, which is a form of anxiety, or maybe even there's so much that anxiety encompasses, but I don't know, if you're somebody that feels excited about things and also feels a lot of muscle tension or something, I don't know. The more practiced you are, and the more you actually practice working through those experiences like attention, what happens over time is that you retrain how your body responds in those moments. So that when you go into a situation that would normally make you feel really anxious, and let's assume it's a healthy situation, as you continue to practice it, as you honor what's happening in your body and what is present for you without judgment or shame, you eventually get to a place where that anxiety is either no longer present, how it feels in your body, or is greatly diminished. That is part of what healing is overall, is that those responses that don't feel good, whether it's thoughts that we have or feelings or emotions or things that are happening in our body, it lessens over time the more you practice it, because your body gets used to something different. And it is really important to not ignore when there is something, whether it's how our intuition speaks to us, or certainly when something isn't feeling right in our body, like there's a new pain that is there, some sort of way that our body isn't feeling good. It's important that we pay attention to that for a lot of reasons. So I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you've got any questions or anything, feel free to leave them in the comments. But I do hope that this helps you recognize that it doesn't have to look any particular way, and that it doesn't have to be a really significant sort of experience, nor does it really need to be a scary experience, because it can start at a really kind of just, I guess, easy level, so to speak. But it is still a practice, and some days it might be easier than others. So be gentle with yourself. So share your thoughts, your reactions, your experiences in the comments. If you think somebody might benefit from this, make sure to share it. And thank you for being here. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.